our chair, Alan Hardy. Obviously, as vice chair, I've been asked to chair the meeting. So we'll begin with obviously item 1 on the agenda, membership and membership update. Anything to update, please, on membership, please, Bruce?
Nothing specific, Chair. As you recall that we welcomed with James and Joe to the last meeting, which delighted to have them on board. The one area, I repeat, we are underrepresented in at the moment on Schools Forum are maintained school members, particularly primary maintained school members, and that's something we'll have to do a little bit more targeted work around to try to boost that.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Apologies for absence.
Sorry, Chair. You see, Sue's got her hand up, I think, just in relation to that item.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just see. Yeah.
Sorry, Bruce. While you were away on leave, I did put a shout out to schools to try and get some interest from primary schools. Don't think we've had anything back yet, but just to say that we have put something out on the e-courier just to try and encourage some membership. All right, sorry, but you were away on leave, so I haven't told you. Apologies.
All right. Okay, thanks for that, Sue. That's very good. We'll move on then, obviously, for apologies for absence. Obviously, Alan Hardy, our chair, which we obviously gave his apologies at the last meeting. Andrea, anybody else has put apologies in, please?
I've got apologies from Warwick Stevenson and Graham Rita.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Any disclosure of interest of any item on the agenda? If not, just obviously, if there is, just put your hand up. If not, then. Right. Okay. No hands up as far as I can see. Right. We'll move on to obviously the minutes of the last meeting of the 17th of January 2024. I'll deal with accuracy first and then obviously move on to matters arising from these minutes. So obviously page 1 for accuracy, agree or not? Shout out. Page 2, accuracy.
Agree.
Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And page 7. Do you agree these are a true record of the meeting of the 17th of January? If they are, I'll sign them as a true meeting. Yeah, all agree? Just nod. Right. Any matters arising? We'll start obviously page 1 again. Page 2. Just shout out because I'm trying to watch the screen and watch the other screen at the same time. Page 3. Any matters arising on this?
We pick up page 3. The DSG is a report of this meeting, Graham. So we'll pick up items.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Yeah. Page 4.
Just in relation to the early years block, it's probably worth stating that following the agreement of the rates at the January meeting, the early years team have been out to consultation with providers, and I think there was little response back in return to that. I think it's an issue that providers just appreciate early notification of their rates to help them with their budget planning from April.
Okay, thank you for that then, Bruce. Yeah, very good. Right, page 5 of the minutes. Page 6. And page 7 of the minutes. Okay, then no matters arising. Well, that's very good. That's quick. So we'll move on, obviously, to any item 5 of the agenda. Any communications at all, Bruce, to obviously for School Forum, please?
There's no specific communications to share in terms of Schools Forum, either from the Formula 40 group or more generally, Graham. But we'll obviously continue to monitor that.
Okay, then, right. Obviously, now we're going to go to item 6, is one of the bigger ones on the agenda, setting the 2024-25 dedicated school grant report to follow. Obviously, we received the report. Bruce, can you obviously share your screen as well, please? And obviously, I believe you're talking about this, yeah?
Certainly, Chair. No problem. Just bear with me. Okay. Members will recall that we brought a similar report in January, which gave details of the high-level notifications. We bring this and deals with delegation decisions specifically. The report in February deals with more details around the proposed use and of the DSG, particularly in relation to high needs and central school services block. So we'll pick that detail up in the in the main report. It's for information to schools forum. There's no formal there's no formal decisions to be made as a result of this report. It's purely for information. Page 1 sets a little bit background, and again, it's just worth highlighting that in the DFE's classification, we continue to mirror the national funding formula. I just wanted to outline there because it caused some discussions at the last meeting. The transfer to the high needs block and the schools block element, because we'd outlined that we were only able to pay the full national funding formula after the introduction of capping and scaling this year, or the increase of capping and scaling. It's important. We'll do some more work ahead in terms of the July meeting and discuss how to take this forward. But there are 3 elements at play here. Historically, we've only managed to pay the full national funding formula rates by use of the local authorities element, which it's provided for growth. In practice, for 24-25, we've asked for £1.1 million transfer, as you'll recall, from the schools block to the high needs block, and actually the growth element from the local authority was £1 million. So one has historically compensated for the other, but we know there are increasing demands on the that growth element in terms of the provision of bulge classes and additional places to ensure we have adequate sufficiency across the county. In order to balance this year, the third element we've had to reduce is the introduction of capping and scaling, which we've done which applies equally across all schools at local authority maintained schools and academies alike. We've introduced a cap, i.e., so we wouldn't take any gains back that were under a cap of 2.13% per pupil, but which is higher than the general level of funding increase anyway, which was around 1.4% per pupil. You recall the key messages being it's a tighter settlement this year, but over and above that 2.13%, where we've scaled back essentially 75% of any gains over and above that, which would be gains through formula elements such as deprivation, such as changes in low prior attainment, etc. That's essentially yielded £667,000, which essentially represents the gap between paying full national funding formula at an uncapped rate and how we've managed to do it in practice. It's something, again, we may consider working with Formula 40 Group about, because we're at national funding formula, but we're unable to fund it fully. And I still think there's an issue there for consideration by the ESFA on behalf of local authorities who are in our position. I'm not going to talk at length on every paragraph like that. I can't see if there are any sort of hands up. Graham, can I ask you to just cover any questions or just?
Yes, Graham Atkinson, you have your hand up.
Okay.
Go ahead, please, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I think thanks for just explaining that, Bruce, because I think it seems such a kind of remarkable point that the national funding formula has been kind of vaunted as the solution, yet local authorities such as ourselves can't meet it without doing what you've explained, and presumably with recourse to capping and scaling, that denies some schools what they would otherwise get under an intended allocation of the national funding formula. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So I think we absolutely have to go on to F40 because there'll be other authorities affected. But it seems Afghan-esque, kind of ludicrous that we're in this position. But it's not. I mean, here's us discussing it at Schools Forum. We've been looking at it for a while, but that the understanding just isn't out there of this stark anomaly.
Yes, I mean I have raised it individually with the ESFA, and I got met with a metaphorical shrug, really, because it's the way that essentially they're applying, capping, scaling, and protection across the whole country, which obviously distributes the funding slightly differently than they would in terms of with a true national funding formula because of historical issues potentially elsewhere. But I do think it's something we'll again. Over the next sort of few months, we'll bring to the attention of Formula 40 and just try to see how best we can highlight this.
I think the capping and scaling is one thing, because obviously that there's some legitimacy in the use of that, and that's a mechanism that exists, I guess, for those purposes. But it's the fact that we've had recourse or had to have recourse to the growth fund, which is not acceptable, because that's that's earmarked for a particular purpose. So it may well be that that's the element that we're particularly pushing.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we're using the growth fund essentially because there isn't enough funding in the national funding formula to fund it without that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's some work for the formula funding committee to look at, obviously, over the next 12 months, which I believe you're a member of, aren't you, Graham, if I remember rightly?
Sorry, I missed that. A member of?
A member of the formula funding committee.
Yes.
Yes, so obviously a bit more work to kind of be done and look at that and everything. Yeah, so we can obviously come back. Right, thank you for that. Any further questions from any of the members present?
Okay, we'll continue on through the report.
Yes,
again.
Please, yeah.
Just highlighting sparsity. I know sparsity's been a major issue for Northern Counties for Northumberland previously. It's worth just highlighting. We've lobbied and campaigned and levered in historically additional funding around sparsity, but that's just increasing marginally as it did last year. Other issues: the central NNDR billing continues to operate in Northumberland, and I think in practice that seems to be operating very well. The intention is to save schools of their administrative element about sort of paying the rates directly. It's essentially paid through the central NNDR team, between the NNDR team and the ESFA. It is important to highlight at the paragraph there that we haven't as yet received final agreement to the proposals that were submitted originally back on the 19th of January, following the last schools forum. We've had a few queries which we've responded speedily to. Again, I don't see any major issues in relation to that, but we still await final confirmation from the ESFA. So the figures in the following table are pending their agreement, but I can't see why they won't. Okay, and again, the figures on the next page represent the the final Northumberland County Council figures, as I say, subject to final notification of approval. And again, you can see there the difference where we've had to introduce capping and scaling compared to the last year. Obviously, we have needed to increase the transfer to the high needs block, and that's another one of the factors in play, as well as the the growth element. Okay. And again, a final reminder there, while some of the elements may seem to have increased by sort of larger elements in terms of, I've noted particularly FSM 6, Forever 6, that's because of the inclusion of the mainstream schools additional grant as part of the overall schools DSG for 24-25, and that's outlined in the table below. Okay, high needs block. Details of the allocation again were provided to the last meeting. I apologise, that's the delegated figure. I should have picked that up. The transfer to the schools block, the high needs block, is of course £1.125 million. There's a link in there to the high needs operational guide if anybody wants to, sort of read into any more detail around the high needs funding, the formula, or any other elements in relation to that. A reminder that historically we've relied on a high needs reserve, but that's essentially, will be exhausted, and we're going to go overdrawn on that by the end of, 23-24, by March 2024. And essentially, when we've looked at the current demands on the high needs block and the amount of resources available, we're identifying potentially a savings requirement of £4 million. And clearly, that will be a key part of the discussions at the following high needs committee meeting following this meeting. So again, in terms of the resolution, please note there that we're setting a budget in line with the allocation of £51.5 million, but that includes a significant savings requirement of over 4 million, and the detail of that is set out in Appendix B. I will just fly briefly down to Appendix B. And again, it's probably just worth highlighting in terms of between the blue and the salmon elements, essentially all of the blue elements, which accounts for the vast majority of the high needs block, are essentially being recycled and returned to schools in some way. The stock problem is there's just not enough of it at the moment. Okay. Pause for breath. There's no specific questions arising in relation to that.
Any questions, please, for Bruce? Yes, David. David Street, please.
Yeah, just to comment specifically around the high needs block, actually, and in terms of for us as Northumberland, actually seeing the high needs block to a degree come to the end of its capacity, it's not a shock to us because we're aware of what's happening out there on the ground, but that is relatively new to us. Just the comment is that other local authorities, both in the northeast and nationally, have well outstripped their spending of high needs block 3-4 years ago, and continue to run in-year deficits. So I don't know, I'm trying to get a small positive out of it. I think Bruce and Abby and other members of the team have been absolutely on top of the high needs block with a fine-tooth comb, ensuring that the allocation and the way it's allocated as directed by Schools Forum, it has been done absolutely appropriately. There's been some fantastic efficiencies right across the board, mainly in schools, but also across central teams, in order to make the funding we've got go even further. And so actually there are a number of positives. We're doing more with the high needs block than ever before. Schools are doing more, meeting the needs of more learners than ever before. There are more referrals. There are more children being going through assessment processes than ever before. A huge amount of work and positive stuff is going on there, meeting the needs of the residents. It's just we're getting to a point where the demand is pushing is beyond the current capacity. But again, and whether it's a slight, we still have done, because of the efforts put in by schools and central teams, doing much better than most other local authorities in this aspect. But there's clearly still some work to do.
Thank you, David. Any other comment? Anything else, Bruce, you want to bring for this item 6, please?
Well, we'll just finish the report very briefly, Graham. The early years block, again, we're just bringing back notification of the rates for School Forum's information. They have been communicated to providers now. And the Central School Services block, again, we're seeing an ongoing reduction in the historic element for funding historic capital commitments and early retirement pensionable costs. So again, while we're reporting a 7.5% decrease, that has been factored into the budget that is set in the final appendix there, which we're hoping will balance for 24-25. We've already reviewed the high needs block budget there. The report, again, all of the the sort of team expenditure has largely been frozen. There's no growth involved in any of that. We know essentially the key elements of growth are SEND top-ups and, to a lesser extent, independent special school fees, together with place funding, which is in the special schools default block at the top. And that report and the the first appendix 1 again represents the overall grant allocations. So that
Okay, right.
report is for the information of forum. Unless there are any other questions in relation to that.
Well, doesn't look like anybody's got their hands up on my screen. But thank you very much, Bruce, for that presentation and doing the report in very short notice. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on now to item 7, high needs fund consultation feedback. I believe that's you, Sue.
That's correct, Graham. Yeah, just give Bruce a bit of a rest for a change. So just a different voice to hear. Yeah, Bruce, I don't know if you want, do you want to share the report on the screen and I'll just talk a little bit to it. It's really just an
Certainly.
information report, just for Schools Forum members, really just to note. You'll notice in the recommendations what we're setting out is that a further more detailed report will come back to Schools Forum in the summer term, following some more detailed consultation with all schools across Northumberland. So the report itself just sets out the questions that we asked, and you'll be aware as forum members that we extended this year's consultation to include a lot of questions around the high needs block funding and SEN funding specifically. And that is because we all knew the pressures that are actually coming on the high needs block. So it was around ensuring that all schools were aware of the pressures that we're going to be facing in the future. So whilst usually our consultation responses are quite low, just 3 or 4 each year, we did get 31 responses this year to the consultation feedback. Again, still a very small number when you consider, the 167 schools across Northumberland. Again, just set out in the report, it gives you in appendices 1 all the detail behind those individual responses. And what we're suggesting within this report is that we take that information, we work with the high needs subgroup really to develop a wider consultation approach in terms of looking at options and ideas, and then really asking Schools Forum to join officers out on the road, setting up interactive workshops with schools to fully explore the options and ideas around how we can deliver a more balanced, shall I say, high needs block. So I think that's it really, Chair, just a real summary of no real firm decisions here, just an approach that we would like to take to get out on the road and engage schools more interactively in the challenges that we face around the high needs block.
Thank you, Sue. I was very impressed as the obviously chair of high needs, 31 responses, and obviously looking at the responses, very clear there is a great need. I'm very pleased to hear you're going to do some road shows and obviously go around the county, explain the problems we have with high needs and things like that. Yeah, because we're not the only county that's suffering with the amount of extra children with educational care plans like that. So thank you very much for the officers of the council for the amount of work you did over this consultation. Much appreciated by the School Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions to Sue? Yes, David, you still got your hand up. I don't know if you wish to carry on.
No.
I know you'll be speaking at the next meeting as well.
Yeah, it was just I don't know. Thank you to the 31 schools that responded, and also when you look at the responses the folk through, there are it's going to sound there are a couple of turkeys voting for Christmas here, but schools recognising the position and actually saying, yeah, I would be happy to have less in order that the size of the cake is a little bit greater for those learners with the highest levels of need. So just to commend that to schools that they have considered it, and those that responded to this point, many of the responses were them actually offering to have less money for their individual school to benefit the greater good, as it were. And I just think that should be commended, because they could have just said no to everything, and that would have been an understandable position to be, because it's not that any school in Northumberland has lots of spare cash. None of them do. They're all as strapped as everybody else, but yet they were still happy to commit some of their funding that they would have got again to support high needs and those learners.
Thank you, David. Yes. Okay then. No further questions for Sue? I'm sorry we're trying to rush on because obviously this meeting's supposed to be just an hour, so I'm trying to keep within the clock because obviously we have a high need one following on. So we'll move on then to obviously item 8 on the agenda, ESFA funding, and I believe that's you again, Bruce, is it? Are you going to share your screen, please?
Yes, I'm happy to, Graham. Just bear with me. The report is in the agenda pack. Just bear with me. Excuse me. You'll recall that there was some initial information sort of headlined by the SFA back in August about additional funding available for schools in financial difficulties. We've now received details of the local authority level allocations, was published just late last year in relation to that. They're again attached at Appendix A, and we'll look at those in more detail subsequently. There is a separate funding stream, and I think the line that's been used in relation to academies, that the funding stream is essentially their standard funding stream where they'd expect any academies or any trusts in financial difficulty to approach the ESFA in the usual manner. There is essentially sort of the 40 million allocated for the project. There was 20 million pound allocated for maintained schools, and there's again, we need to note that there's only 35 local authorities that have received funding. So again, that's slightly more than 1 in 5, with the amounts paid ranging from 1.7 million pounds to 179,000. In Northumberland, we've received 344,000 pounds. Essentially, we were one of I've said 4 northeast authorities to receive funding, but again, I'd overlooked County Durham in the list there. So County Durham have also received funding, together with North Tyneside, South Tyneside, and Gateshead. It's interesting because there didn't seem to be any obvious common denominator or common factors between the authorities who have received the significant amounts of funding. I don't think North Tyneside has a lot in common with Liverpool when we look at factors around deprivation and whatever else, but nevertheless, it's not about the overall local authority position, but it's individual schools within those authorities which is levered in this grant funding. In terms of looking at the overall amounts, of course, while we're pleased to receive £344,000, I'll just again remind Schools Forum that in July every year we bring a report showing the aggregated level of balances held by schools. And we also split that in terms of schools with surplus balances and schools with deficit balances. And we identified at that point, and again, that's almost a year ago now, we had 23 maintained schools with aggregated deficit balances of £2.7 million. So the grant funding is essentially represents only 12.7% of this figure. I think the harsh reality arising from that is, if again you're a school who are struggling to balance an in-year budget, or again have just about exhausted your reserves, unfortunately there isn't going to be any funding available from this fund. We need to take a really targeted approach in relation to this money, and that's what we've outlined in the the couple of lines below there. It's again, it'd be awarded to schools only in the most serious financial position and where the schools are actively working to produce towards producing a balanced in-year budget. The scheme for financing maintained schools dictates the approach to be taken, where the local authority can issue a notice of concern or a warning letter, and to my sort of mind, we've probably only done that twice in the past in the past 7 years I've been involved with Northumberland. So again, we're going to target funding specifically around that and look at allocations on a on a fair, equitable basis in relation to that. Again, the messages from the ESFA are very much that this is one-off funding, and to quote, the department has no plans for similar additional funding in 2024 to 2025. So again, just reiterating the fact we need to target this funding appropriately and specifically. There is a link in the report which has additional information and the grant conditions attached, but I'm happy to take any other questions in relation to that, Chair.
Okay. Any questions? Graham, yes, Graham Atkinson, please.
Yeah, just interested, Bruce, in your take on the kind of longer term picture for schools that are struggling. Obviously, this is a kind of short term fix for some, and just reference Sue David's earlier point about a possibility of firing more from the schools block into the I&E's block as part of the solution. That was certainly responded to largely favourably by the 31 that responded. Is there a problem coming down the track in terms of the viability of some schools in Northumberland, or is that very much dependent on new deals from central government in due course? Is there anything that we as a schools forum should be conscious of that you're aware of?
I think, again, I'm interested in wider thoughts in relation. I think the prime thing for me, and again, I've said it before in very crude terms, like it or not, education is very much a bums on seats business. You need to maintain pupil numbers and sort of maintain pupil numbers or even marginally increase them, and that will go a long way to providing some stability and help with sort of medium-term financial planning, which is essential to all schools. I was part of a meeting in the summer with David, the chief executive of the ESFA wider meeting, and the lobby that was going was, we appreciate there may not be much additional funding about, particularly pre-election year, because it's all being promised in tax cuts. A lot of the education funding this year is obviously went to the extension of the early years offer as well. But what we were clamoring for was sort of medium-term, multi-year settlements. And he felt very much that was undeliverable in the current climate, which was extremely disappointing, because I think that would be the major thing that would help all schools, rather than relying on the single year annual allocation, which comes out in late December every year. There is no indication of sort of funding sort of further down the track in relation to additional funding being sort of increased for schools. I think either wrongly or rightly, there is a key focus around SEN at the moment, both through groups, as we know, through Formula 40 and, more widely than that. Ben, I know you're on the call and you've made the point before that some of the numbers just don't add up. The latest example, of course, being the teachers, the additional teachers pay grant, where essentially we're being asked to fund sort of, I think it was 3.5%, but for 24-25. But we know the general school funding level and letters from the Secretary of State for Education herself have only gone up by 1.5%, 1.4-1.5%. There is a gap. There is an additional pressure on schools. If I was playing devil's advocate, which is slightly dangerous, I think the issue is in terms of that potentially the ESFA or the DFE are looking at balances held by schools, and potentially, and while some of the programs will never say use your balances, but looking at how balances have been accrued over the last few years, potentially around COVID, and I still wonder whether that's a factor or not. That's an entirely a personal view, but that's what you asked for, Graham.
Yeah, that's helpful. So Abby was going to come in there. Abigail.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm actually just in the process of updating our spreadsheet to have a look at what the year-end positions looking like for schools, but it has come back into concern. So about a year ago in October, the school balances were looking terrible, but then the mainstream schools additional grant came out and everyone turned their position back around, and that helped us through with those inflationary pressures. Again, this year we've had the teachers pay grant, but we've had nothing for the school support staff pay award, which for schools was way higher than what a lot of our schools had budgeted for, with staff tend to be at the lower end of the grades. and that has put all of our school balances overall back into jeopardy. So at the moment, what we're looking at was and this is just maintained schools, but looking at over the 4 years, we were looking at, I think the deficit prediction is around 5 million at the end of the four-year period. So that's drawn some concern, because that's part of our year-marked reserves for the council as a whole. So the school balances go into a deficit and the DSG high needs block goes into a deficit. There's 2 areas the council then has to cover, whilst its own resources are already stretched. So I'm starting to do, my team will be going out to do the budget setting process soon with schools, and we're going to try and do a bit more work with schools at looking at the longer term picture, because we do know some schools just don't really look at years 3 and 4 on a budget spreadsheet because they don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what the funding's going to be. And I think Bruce is right. Only getting a 1-year settlement just really doesn't help the problem. But what we're going to do is to try and do a bit more focus on years 3 and 4, because some schools will have pupil numbers dropping off or something changing about their school, and they won't address it yet because they'll just wait a little bit nearer the time and they know a bit more about what funding they've got coming in. So they have scope to do something about it, but they know that, therefore they don't worry about it until nearer the time. But I think because of the wider picture and how things are looking now, we need to focus on years 3 and 4. We need to know those schools who have nowhere to go compared to the schools who just haven't looked at it yet. So we're going to try and do a bit more work around budget setting to get a better feel, but there is real concern around the overall school balances at the moment.
Thanks very much for that. It was just, I suppose, to know what we as a forum should be exposed to, engaging with, and we're looking to you, Abigail, Bruce, etc., just to obviously to give us the information that is appropriate for us as a forum around that. And Bruce, your reference to it's very much linked to allocations in places and demand for places. And if there's detail around that, whether it's to do with growth or numbers falling off and what that might mean for us as a forum, it's just to make the case for making sure we get that longer term view where it's relevant to us.
Yeah. One of the questions I was going to ask, obviously, one of your officers, the surplus places, we had a report some time ago. Have they actually changed these numbers? Because obviously in the Blythe Valley, the amount of new houses that are being built, and obviously has that changed, because there was quite a number of surplus places in primary and secondary in that area. I mean, I don't know what's it like out in the west or in the north. Have any days changed over the, this coming academic year? Anybody from the
Sorry, Graham. Just to say now that those predictions are continuing to move forward, birth rate is reducing across the whole of Northumberland. So what you're seeing is new build development coming in are just sustaining some of the numbers that we've actually got. More than happy to bring a more detailed report back into Schools Forum around the school organisation plan, just to set out surplus places and where we're at. But still off the top of my head, we're nearing 50% surplus places in Berwick, probably 46% Hayden Bridge. That position isn't changing, and I think looking at reception allocations for September 2024, there are a number of schools who have got no reception applications at all. So those challenges that we're talking about, reducing balances is just going to be more challenging for schools as we move forward. But I think you're right, looking at the predictions so that schools can plan as well. So that's probably a good thing for us to share with schools moving forward, because some schools, again, when they return the budgets back to Abby and the team, so we find sometimes that they're inflating pupil numbers. So there is a cross check back into my team to make sure that those numbers are realistic when people are looking at future budgets and planning in year as well. So we do triangulate the information so our schools know more detail about what they should be planning for. But happy to bring another report if that just sets the context for everybody.
If you could bring it back for the 17th of July when we're a face-to-face meeting, it'd be very, very useful to schools know what's happening in September roughly there. Okay,
Yep,
because
yep.
by that time they should know how many children coming into reception and into year 7 as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
I'll
very
come.
much. Jeffrey.
I'll probably combine that as well with our SEN and AP capacity strategy, because that gives you the whole context across the whole of Northumberland, not just the mainstream view. So I think it'd be really important just to say where the growth is coming, and that is obviously in special educational needs.
Graham, you're
Hi.
over in the west. Are you finding problems getting children into year 7 or something like that, or do you have a full house each year?
It's very much dependent on local dynamics. I think there is the longer term West Tynedale decline in the demographic, but depending on where an individual school at in terms of its reputation, that can draw in from further afield or lose to further afield. So I think that's the kind of broad picture.
Okay. Nicola, you're up in the wilds of Northumberland somewhere, a small school. What's your like getting children into reception?
Yeah, I think the issue that we have is that it's housing affordability and young families. So particularly at the primary age range, young families can't afford to live in the houses. So I think that there may be a little bit of movement in the older ages, and we definitely gain children in Key Stage 2, where families have been moving either from Newcastle or from even further afield, cities in other counties that are moving out to us, where but coming in at the bottom end, it's always very it's very up and down. I think my figures probably for September in reception will be 4 this year, but they were 8 that came in September last year, and I think I've got 9 the next year. And so I can't look 3-4 years in the future with any level of rigor, because 5 children is virtually 10% of my entire school, and that's where the challenge lies, is the money going up and down, but yet I've still got to keep a teacher in that class. But yeah, I mean, Abby, I totally take your point about sort of not being particularly realistic in years 3 and 4 and having to focus a little bit on it, but I look at it and go, well, I literally have no idea. I may have children coming in Key Stage 2. I have no idea what children are going to come in at the bottom end. And so if I were to worry about it, then I would probably leave the profession sooner than I'm likely to, because the stress levels are just immense thinking about that budget in year 3 and year 4, and I'm not prepared to think about it, frankly, from that perspective. Yeah. And I don't think there's any school locally that's different.
Yeah. Can I just go to Joe Holmes there, right? Obviously, you're in Blythe Valley, I believe, yeah? What's the thing like in there for your area? Because obviously, area of high deprivation and everything like that, yeah?
Yeah, so at Malvern's, where I'm based, our numbers are fairly steady. We're a 2-form entry school. However, I know that at one of our sister schools, the reception numbers are dropping really significantly. Even with the introduction of 2-year-old provision to try and encourage people to continue to attend the school, it's still really difficult. I think it's a really key point that, yes, in our area, the housing development has been absolutely phenomenal. However, we're not necessarily seeing the impact of that. I know at another of our sister schools, we're getting a lot of AAL intake mid-year, and so that isn't impacting on our, much like just saying in the rural areas, that isn't impacting necessarily on our early years numbers, and we are seeing more of that in Key Stage 2, and at times having to go over numbers in Key Stage 2, but then that's not reflected further down the school, which then has the impact on that additional pupil premium funding coming through and having the stability of that, etc. So that is quite difficult for us. I do hope that we will see in our area that some of the housing is more affordable, so we may benefit from those younger families in years to come, but currently the picture, it doesn't marry up with the introduction of all of the development and then our current numbers. So it is a struggle. In terms of from an academy perspective, we've had a really big kind of PR push to try and encourage numbers as well, and that was a directive from the academy themselves. So at Malvern's, it seems that we can maintain sort of around that 50 number, but that in itself has a huge impact. Being 10 down on our pan is enormous, and we do seem to be able to pick it up in Key Stage 2 with those incoming numbers. But for us, I think it's really interesting when you talk about being 5 down could be 10% of your whole school population. For us, being 10 down in a year group does have a significant impact at a 2 form entry.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go, James, you're on there. I know you haven't got your hands up, but I believe you're up in Alnwick, yes?
Yeah, it's currently wet and wild in Alnwick, as
I
it
know,
always
yeah,
is.
well,
And
it's
it
wet
is
and
probably
wild
characteristic.
as well. What's obviously Alnwick, obviously kind of different kind of outcome of pupils coming in and about that compared with, say, Blight Valley. What's your situation in, obviously, in your school?
Yeah, it's similar to everyone else on the call today. It's, you know, we've probably only got 180 living in catchment. We have in class in year pans anywhere between 200 and 260. We have a lot of children travelling out of catchment into the school, but there's no, you know, as much as there's development and housing. Again, as everyone said, it's kind of people that have already had children moving into the area. There's not a huge influx of children currently, but the instability of not knowing year on year, kind of, are we getting anywhere between 200 and 240 children? It means budgeting's more difficult because you're just waiting for that year 7 number to come in and see what it looks like.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments about what Bruce has been saying on this?
Mike Dean Hall's had his hand up for quite some time, Graham. I think you must have missed him.
Yeah, okay, right. Mike, please, nice to see you.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Sue. Just to echo from sort of the North End and Berwick area, we're seeing the same things across the schools in terms of declining incomes into reception numbers, and also further complicated by our reorganisation over the next 3 years, makes forward budget planning just remarkably difficult, stressful, and somewhat impossible, I have to say, in terms of trying to plan for 3 years out on the back of a changing structure as well as a declining number coming at the lower end. So just echoing what other colleagues have said across the county, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it must be very hard up there, obviously, right up in the wilds, the Wanney in North Wooler area and everything like that, Mike. But yes.
It's always hard up here in the wilds, Graham.
I know, I used to work up there in the national park, so I know what he's like, yes. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, in my own school, over the last 4 years, we had a drop. We're 1.5 form entry. We had a drop of 15 pupils in 1 year, 18 in another year, and I think about 12 in this academic year. So it's a lot of money out of your budget, you know, to obviously there to think. And I mean, I can tell you now, we have to take £94,000 from our reserve to balance our budget this year. So we're pretty well empty the pot. Any other comments?
Probably just worth commenting. I'd overlooked the date previously, Chair, but given that it's the 14th of February, maybe we should be hoping for a short-term boost to pupil numbers triggered by Valentine's Day today, but we'll have to see how we get on.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, but obviously also it's Ash Wednesday, and obviously those are the Christian thing will be getting ashes on their forehead. We call it in the Catholic Church Dirty Forehead Day, but I know it's in the Church of England not going to put a cross on there. They're going to put a heart on instead, being Valentine's Day. So yeah, right. Anything else? Right. I don't know. Sue's smiling there.
Yeah, very entertaining, Graham. You were. Thanks.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm right. Anything else on this item? Because obviously the time is ticking on. Right. Yeah. No. So we'll just move on to obviously. Thanks, Bruce, for that thingy, Bob, and obviously some very interesting comments from members of the forum. Yeah. Work program for meeting dates. If you just obviously share that page, please, then that'll show you where we are. Yeah.
Yes, there we are in terms of the rest of the dates of 2024. We'll just highlight, of course, that the next scheduled meeting for the schools forum is Wednesday, the 17th of July, which is our annual face-to-face meeting at County Hall. Again, the meeting will be 9:30 till potentially 12 o'clock, but we will probably have coffee and breakfast available for members from 9. But we'll obviously confirm that nearer the day.
Okay, then, right. Okay, so that's the next full school forum meeting. High needs, obviously, there is a high needs committee meeting to follow this one. Just to remind you, you will need to go out of this meeting and then go into the team login for the high needs committee meeting, which is obviously been sent out to you already, okay? And with the agenda and about that. So I don't think there's anything else because nobody has sent any other business. So with no Bruce, I take it Alan didn't send anything through for you to discuss or anything like that, the chair.
I'm not aware of any other business unless anybody is looking to raise something specifically.
Well, yeah, I'll let you have a few minutes. Anybody got anything? Just put your hands up. I'm trying to follow my screen. Only got 5 people on my screen at the time. So, right. I'm sure I'm going to see some of you onto the High Needs Committee in a few minutes time. So, give you time. If we go off now, we'll have time to make yourself a pot of tea or something like that, or comfort break, and then we'll log back on for 10:30 for the other one. So
Yeah,
thank you very much for your time this morning, and thank you for obviously making my job as chair very easy to do.